Well, guys, this is Randy Edwards. Randy, you're working with the Australian College of Ministry, is that right?
That's correct, Col.
But you're an odd mix, aren't you? Because initially American?
That's right. Grew up in America, but been in Australia 32 years.
And you've got a really interesting passion, which is exploring new expressions of church and communication within church. Tell us something about that.
Yes, probably 20 years ago, I had a sense that somehow the church wasn't connecting with people outside the church. But it was only about 10 years ago that another guy in Australia came and had a chat with me about starting something new. And we explored what it would look like for 12 months and finally decided we didn't know what it would look like, so we would just start something. And so we've started what looks like some would call a home church, although we don't use that language. But it's basically just groups that are exploring what it means to be disciples within their context. Right? We don't do anything that looks like church. We don't see the gathering together as the primary focal point. The gathering together is to empower people when they leave. So the most important part of our groups is when we're not together. And so it's a little bit of a different kind of approach, but it's all about taking the message of Jesus into the community rather than expecting the community to come into our group to hear the message of Jesus.
Now, there'll be some people who are so horrified by that they've already switched off. So sadly, I'm not sure we can do much about those guys.
Probably not.
But there are some here who would be saying, "Oh my, that's amazing. That's just what I'm looking for."
Yep.
Now you actually started an online discussion, I believe, using podcasts and things. Tell us something about, because we're going to put these up here on EA21 on the website here each week. Tell us some of the things you're going to be discussing over the coming weeks on this site.
Okay, well, what we intend to do is we want to resource people who are leading alternative groups and don't have the traditional resources that are necessary for the leaders. So we explore things, we're going to explore things like what are the key values that Jesus taught and what do they mean for a follower of Jesus to be lived out in our society? Now sometimes we disagree with the way in which the church understands those. We actually want to experience Jesus as he is, not as the church sometimes filters him. So we look at key values like grace, like faithfulness, like love, those kinds of things, but with a twist. That is, what does it actually mean? What are the difficult questions that are often asked about that? And what does it actually mean to live out grace? Not what does it mean to experience it, but what would it mean for me to be a gracious person in the society and culture which I live? So we do those kinds of things. We also have intend to do 3 or 4 podcasts on what are the key elements of leading a sort of an exploration group rather than a traditional church. What kinds of things would you do? What kinds of skills does a leader need to be able to do that well? And then we also wrestle with some of the tough questions that people ask that the church generally doesn't want to deal with. To give an example, we'll deal with a question like, does God reward faithfulness? That is, if I'm faithful, will I get a bigger reward?
Now, I can't wait to. We're going to start this right now. Actually, we're going to put the first of these discussions up right now, and this is going to run and run. But Randy, I'm going to start the discussion. I'm going to ask you a really hard question, because so many of those involved in seeking to find new expressions of church and what it means to live out their missional lifestyle have actually been looked at by those within the established, even evangelical world, as being slightly heretical, or they've been accused of throwing out the baby with the bathwater, we say in English. Yep. Is it possible to stay true to a biblical faith and be critical and of traditional church and explore new means?
It is. However, the group that I'm a part of did not form out of a criticism of the traditional church necessarily. Yes, we saw that it wasn't working, but we're not anti-church. We don't do church bashing. We don't argue against that. In fact, we work quite closely with local churches, traditional churches. We're quite happy to provide resources for them. We connect with them. I'm actually a member of a traditional church while I'm working as a fresh or different expression. So it is. Let me put it. It's difficult to be true to Jesus in every context. Okay? If you're in the traditional church, it's the church pressures oftentimes that force you to conform to things that don't quite fit the teachings of Jesus. If you move outside the traditional church, then it's the world that forces you at times to live values that aren't according to the teachings of Jesus. So this is why we start a different expression, is we think that what we need more than anything else is a support group that will help us to see through the pressures around us. And then as we attempt to live differently, we will fail at times. We need someone who can come and say, that's all right, you've tried, let's help you get better at it. And when we succeed, we come together to rejoice and say, that is fantastic. Now go and do it better the next time, and go and live with that success in terms of living out that value. And oftentimes the values of the kingdom are lived out in specific instances. It's nice to say, oh, I love everybody. But it's when I actually go down and cook a meal for a homeless person that it demonstrates I actually love that person. So that's the kind of thing we do. And we're not anti-church. We see a number of churches that are very effective in the traditional line. We see a lot that aren't. And all we say is this is a different model. Now, in our particular groups in Australia, we actually have 4 groups that are still a part of the traditional church. One congregation saw what we were doing, said we need something like this as a part of our congregation. So they started 1 group, then 2 groups, then 3 groups, then 4 groups, and we would say that's fantastic. They don't have to separate from the traditional church necessarily, if that church will allow that freedom.
That's fantastic. Randy, we look forward very much to following this discussion. You'll be able to join it on the discussion board, so you'll be able to comment on everything that's thrown around in these podcasts, and we look forward very much to seeing what comes of that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Colin.